1 year ago today, time of publishing, DC Finest released their very first volume. Let's take a look at the line 1 year in.
It's morphin' time!
Hello, this is Soundout here, and on today's video, we're talking about DC Finest 1 year into the line, because November 5th, 2024 saw the first release, which was Batman Year 1 and Year 2, as well as the first volume of Superman. And this kicked off DC's DC Finest publishing line, which is sort of an answer to Marvel's Epic Collection, where basically the idea is that you get, a year or two, or, basically just 600 pages of a DC character in publishing order chronological history. And that can include a lot of things. There's a whole timeline on the back, the spines mention what years they cover, and they're pretty consistently put out. There is, 3 or 4 a month since release, and we have the schedule all the way through July of 2026. And so I thought, you know what, it's a good chance to talk about DC Finest and highlight all the characters, because there may be some volumes you may have missed or you didn't know were coming up, and I think that would be kind of fun. I really like these, and the fact that so far they've kept a $39.99 US price point on the cover is pretty incredible, especially with the large page counts. A lot of people have been enjoying these. I've been enjoying these. So I thought, let's take a look back at everything that has been released and has been announced for every character in the DC Finest line. We'll go A to Z on the title, right? So if it says Batman, that's obviously going to come after Aquaman, but before Catwoman. So we're just going to go alphabetical, and we will go chronological as well for those wanting to kind of keep track of where we are in the timelines of these characters. So if you enjoy these types of videos, hit the like button, lets YouTube know, lets me know you enjoyed it. Hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss out on future comic videos. But let's dive into our look back at DC Finest. Alright, alphabetically, we're going to begin with Aquaman. The first Aquaman volume is 1956-1962. The King of Atlantis, released January 7th, 2025. So the interesting part about Aquaman is that he didn't have an ongoing series for a while. So this is one of those cool, kind of collecting volumes, just kind of going through all of his early Silver Age appearances. And specifically, this is the Silver Age version. There was a Golden Age Aquaman. This is kind of like the reboot of it, which is pretty cool, and it's a nice way to kind of start off Aquaman into some stuff that's not usually collected in other lines. Next up, we have Batgirl, 2000 to 2002, Nobody Dies Tonight, April 8th, 2025. So this is interesting because this actually starts with Batgirl issue 8, because I think what they did here is they thought a good endpoint would be the storyline where Shiva gives Batgirl 1 year to prepare for a fight, and so they go from the end of that story and then back it up to however many issues can fit in a page count. Because you think it would start at issue 1, but they actually started issue 8, so that way you get the entire, year 2 fight Shiva storyline, which makes some sense. And I imagine that a prior Batgirl volume will include a bunch of other stories from the No Man's Land arc of Batman that featured Cassandra Cain's Batgirl, because this volume is Cassandra Cain. Now, that being said, the title of the Finest line is not Batgirl Cassandra Cain, so there's a chance that all the Batgirls will be rolled into one line. We'll have to wait and see, because that's the only Batgirl volume we have so far. Naturally, next up is Batman, who has the most volumes to date. First of all, we have 1939-1941, The Legend of the Dark Knight, releasing January 27th, 2026. This is all the initial Golden Age Batman stuff from Detective 27 onward. And this is some really classic material. It's the beginning, the origins of Batman. You can start to see where the character goes from this brooding loner into becoming a character who has a grand supporting cast. Robin is introduced within less than a year after Batman's introduced, showing the importance of that character. And then when you get to the main Batman series issues, you start to see introductions of classic villains like the Joker and Catwoman, etc. But this is pretty cool to see this kind of go back to the beginning point in Batman's history, as he is their most famous character. Chronologically, our next Batman volume is 1985-1986, Red Skies, released September 2nd, 2025. Now, this volume is very interesting because this was released after some other volumes that take place later, but it starts our sequential run of Batman that we have pretty consistent right now. This is all the issues of Batman leading in and around Crisis on Infinite Earths. So it's got the last of the pre-Crisis Batman, the Crisis Infinite Earths event itself, and then it goes into other issues after that before Batman 401, which is officially when post-crisis Batman starts. So it's the whole transition period between the pre-Crisis on Infinite Earths and the post-Crisis on Infinite Earths reboot of the DC Universe. And because Batman didn't change over immediately when that event finished, and you can see kind of the way that things progress over time, especially leading into the next volume, which was the first DC Finest, 1986 to 1987, Batman Year 1 and Year 2. So this is a collection that starts at Batman 401. This is officially the start of post-Crisis Batman, which is part of the Legends crossover, and naturally includes the famous Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli Batman Year 1 storyline that told his new origin for the new rebooted DC history. It also includes Batman Year 2 and several other iconic stories. And honestly, if you're trying to get into Batman, this is a really fantastic volume to go with. Though do note there is a bit of a misprint on later printings of this volume involving the table of contents. The first printing's fine, but the later problems, I think they duplicated one of the table of contents pages. It's not a super big deal. The rest of the issues are fine. Just something to keep in mind. 1987 to 1988, Batman the Killing Joke and Other Stories, released May 20th, 2025. So this contains multiple iconic Batman stories, including The Killing Joke and The Son of the Demon, two very, very special graphic novels, as well as all the issues that came out in between. And of note, this does contain the original colors for Killing Joke, just like Batman Year 1 contained the original colors as well, not the modern recolors. And typically with DC Finest, they go with what was originally published, if it was available, and they go with the original colors if they can. There are some other weird little hiccups in reprintings, but it's not unique to the Finest line, so I'm not really worried about it. But the important part here is this is the next volume following the previous one. Following that, 1988 to 1989, A Death in the Family, which contains the iconic Death in the Family storyline. This is releasing April 21st, 2026. And this contains not only Death in the Family, but also Batman the Cult, showing that other side Batman stories will be included in a DC Finest line, which I'm very glad to see because I like the fact that these volumes are curated to include everything, all the major stories involving the characters, and it's really awesome to see that. The next volume after that will be 1989 Blind Justice, releasing July 14th, 2026. This is our next sequential volume. There's a little bit more Batman material here, so it doesn't actually get to 1990 quite there yet, but this is a pretty thick volume with a lot of iconic imagery and a lot of interesting storylines. And that's it for the Batman line for the moment. I find it interesting we do have currently 5 just around post-crisis to post-crisis Batman, 5 sequential volumes, but we are jumping back to get us at least the first Golden Age Batman volume. Really curious to see what will be next. I have a feeling they're going to keep going on the post-crisis ones because they have been selling well, and I think it just kind of makes sense because a lot of that post-crisis Batman has been split up over the years and not put in one consistent line. All right, our next character is Blue Beetle. Starting with 1964 to 1981, Blue Beetle challenges the Red Knight. This volume is very interesting because a lot of this has never been reprinted before, and it's also the shortest page count on a DC Finest because it contains all the pre-crisis Silver Age Blue Beetle stories that were done by Charlton Comics that DC has ownership of. There was literally nothing else they could have added to this volume. It is complete, and presumably the next chronological volume of Blue Beetle will contain the Ted Kord stuff that's in the DC universe. Also, this volume released August 12th, 2025. So this is a very interesting volume. It's a really cool thing to start Blue Beetle with stuff that's never been reprinted before because DC Finest, when it first started, was kind of stuff we've had before, but in a new format. This is brand new material, and that goes the same for some future volumes. And so I really like that DC Finest is doing a mix of stuff that's never been reprinted before and stuff that has been, but in a new, more concise format. Our next character is Catwoman, and her first volume, 1988 to 1994, Lifelines, released December 17th, 2024. Now, this is interesting because it does have the famous 90s Catwoman on the cover, which it does contain, but it also does contain Catwoman Defiant, a graphic novel, and the Catwoman miniseries that takes place in and around Batman Year 1, showing Selina's perspective of events. And so this is a great volume. It has a lot of the great iconic Catwoman storylines, and that Catwoman miniseries had never been reprinted before, so it's really nice to see it out again. And this is starting off also the long-running 1993 Catwoman series, which will need multiple volumes to complete. Like 1994 to 1996, Vengeance and Vindication, releasing June 10th, 2025. This is our next sequential volume for Catwoman, and I hope they keep doing this because the previous Catwoman paperbacks didn't even get as far as Vengeance and Vindication did, so I'm hoping that we're going to keep going on this trend. Also, this does contain stuff that ties into the 0 Hour event, which is also fun. And surprisingly, that is not Commandy. Just in case anybody was wondering, I thought it was, and then I read the story, I was like, nope, that's not Commandy, that's another Jungle Man that wears the exact same outfit. But yeah, we got 2 Catwoman so far, and hopefully we see more Catwoman in the future. Our next character is Deadman, 1967 to 1977, How Many Times Can a Guy Die?, releasing March 24th, 2026. Now this is interesting because the Deadman character has an omnibus, which this is not that smaller than a page count than the omnibus. So honestly, this is what I would call a DC Finest that's practically a paperback omnibus. The next sequential Deadman volume would finish out what's in the omnibus, but go a little bit further than that omnibus did, which would be nice to see. Next up, The Demon, 1972 to 1974, Birth of the Demon, releasing February 24th, 2026. This will contain the entire Jack Kirby The Demon series featuring Etrigan, as well as some other stories that we haven't gotten full clarity on the contents yet, and maybe DC is still working that out, but the page count is a lot more than what was included with the 16-issue Demon trade paperback from before, and I'm very much looking forward to getting more of this. Etrigan is a really cool character that a lot of people don't know just outside of his like animation appearances in like DCAU or Batman the Brave and the Bold, so I'm really excited for more people to be able to read the classic Jack Kirby Demon series. So next up, we have Doom Patrol, 1963 and 1966, The World's Strangest Heroes, releasing February 11th, 2025. This contains most of the Silver Age Doom Patrol omnibus and gets the series running. And luckily, the next volume, 1966-1978, Death of the Doom Patrol, releasing January 13, 2026, will get us the rest of what was in the Doom Patrol Silver Age omnibus, and I believe it goes a little bit further than that, which is really cool to see, because I like that these volumes are a bit more comprehensive than some of the omnibus releases. Alright, so DC Finest does an event line. They actually jumped Marvel here. They got the events out first. The earliest event we got, 1985, Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1, released October 21st, 2025. This contains the first 4 issues of Crisis on Infinite Earths, and all of the tie-in issues that take place in and around that part of the story. Now, a lot of those tie-in issues can sometimes not have a lot of huge connections to the Crisis event, but the event Finest line is basically, here's the main miniseries plus all the tie-ins, so you can read the entire event. This Crisis line is already confirmed to be 4 books. We don't know when the second one is coming out, but Crisis does have a new touch-up and recolor to match the original colors. It's going to be in other future printings like Absolute Crisis on Infinite Earths, so we shall see when we get the next DC Finest. It also has a little bit of overlap with some other volumes like Justice League of America and Batman. We have the 1994 event 0 Hour, Part 1, released December 10th, 2024, containing 0 Hour, Crisis in Time 3 to 4, as well as all the tie-ins. Now, 0 Hour, they were doing a cute thing where it was actually 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, as opposed to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's why it's 3 to 4 in Part 1. And then we have 0 Hour Part 2, which is May 6th, 2025 release, which contains the other half of 0 Hour. And this is much cheaper than buying the 0 Hour Omnibus, which was always like $175 for some reason. This contains the entire thing in 2 volumes, $80 cover price, which is a whole lot better if you're wanting to read everything tying into 0 Hour. Next up, we have The Flash, who's been put in a weird position. The earliest volume is 1956 to 1961, The Human Thunderbolt, released November 26, 2024, containing Silver Age Flash stories from the debut of Barry Allen as The Flash onward. But the next volume is not the next sequentially, it's jumping to 1970 to 1974 with The Fastest Man Dead, releasing April 14th, 2026. So it's weird, we basically have jumped about 80 issues in the future, and that's just the way they decided to do it. I'm not exactly sure why. It's one of those, maybe the Human Thunderbolt didn't sell super well, so they're trying to jump ahead to a different era. We shall see when those gaps hopefully get filled in the future. I mean, Marvel Epic Collections have been filling in gaps for 10 years now, so this is more of a marathon than a sprint. Our next grouping has got me very excited, is The Fourth World, 1970-1971, When the Old Gods Die, June 23rd, 2026. Very curious to see how this will be mapped out, because this is going to be containing all of Jack Kirby's Fourth World titles: Mr. Miracle, Forever People, New Gods, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, and Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane. These are all interconnected, and they were published in a format, especially Mr. Miracle, Forever People, New Gods, and Jimmy Olsen, were kind of published in a format where they're almost weekly, and the story of the New Gods will be going that way. And with the way the other DC Finest are mapped out, where it's like publication order, this should be one of the best reading orders of Jack Kirby's Fourth World, and I'm very excited to see how this will turn out. Next up, we have Green Arrow with 1987-1988, The Longbow Hunters, released January 21st, 2025. This is Mike Grell's post-crisis Green Arrow series, beginning with the Longbow Hunters miniseries, leading into the 1988 Green Arrow series, as well as including other crossover appearances. This is very good, and this is also very mature. There are no mature labels on these books, but Killing Joke for Batman, that's a mature book, but this entire volume is a mature book. Which is nice to see that we're not going to have like a split. There's not going to be stuff left out because like, oh, this is a mature content, we have to put it in a different line. It's all included. It's all inclusive with DC Finest, which is really cool to see. And we are getting a second volume of Grell's run with 1988 to 1989's The Trial of Oliver Queen, coming out in February 10th, 2026. And this also will be containing key Black Canary stories from Action Comics Weekly, which is great to see because that would have been orphaned otherwise. Moving next to Green Lantern. Our earliest volume is 1963 to 1965, Defeat a Green Lantern, releasing December 3rd, 2024. And this contains the early part of Hal Jordan as Green Lantern, though I don't know if it's exactly at the beginning. It is kind of just at that start. It's going to be a lot of Silver Age Green Lantern, a lot of those crazy sci-fi stories. Then our next volume will be 1965 to 1968, Earth's Other Green Lantern, releasing November 18th, 2025. That's picking up right where the previous volume left off, which is great to see. Love that we have a little bit of consistency in the volumes. That being said, the next Green Lantern volume will be 1969-1971, Hard Traveling Heroes, releasing July 28th, 2026. This is going to be Green Lantern, Green Arrow combined together, because both books weren't selling, so they combined the books together. And this was their Hard Traveling Heroes era, where they tackled social issues while on the road. Very excited to see this collected, because sometimes the omnibus collections or previous trade paperbacks were leaving stuff out, and this seems to be more complete than we've seen before. Next, we have Harley Quinn, 1993 and 2001, Birth of the Mirth, February 18th, 2025 release date. Now, this is a huge lot of stuff, because this not only contains Harley's main universe first appearances, but it also contains her focal issues from the DCAU tie-in comics like Batman Adventures, which is kind of interesting because we're mixing in non-main universe stuff with main universe stuff to kind of catalog the history of a character. There's no other volume quite like this, so I'm kind of curious to see if this will be a format used in the future. Next, we have Hawkman, 1960 and 1966, Wings Across Time, released August 19th, 2025. This contains Silver Age Hawkman by Joe Kubert, Gardner Fox. This is an iconic run for a lot of reasons. It starts with the Brave and the Bold backup story appearances for Hawkman. Sometimes he was the lead, sometimes backup, as well as other crossover issues and the first 16 issues of the Silver Age Hawkman. Really looking forward to this continuing, because there's a lot of Hawkman that's never been reprinted, and DC Finest would be a good format for it. So we shall see how this progresses in the future. So now let's introduce Concept, which is a genre volume with DC Finest Horror, 1969-1970, The Devil's Doorway, released September 9th, 2025. So this does not contain a single series, but instead contains issues and stories from House of Secrets, House of Mystery, The Witching Hour, The Unexpected, and some bonus stuff from The Phantom Stranger. These were horror anthology comics, and so putting them all together into a single horror anthology type volume is a genius move, because I don't think you could sell any of these titles individually, but now we have a format to release them. It will take a very long time to do all of them, but hey, you know what? I'm glad that there is at least some format to at least get part of these collected, if not the entire thing, at some point in time. All right, next we have The Joker, 1969-1981, The Last Ha-Ha, which is an April 28, 2026 release. This is going to be a compilation of Joker stories plus Joker's Bronze Age 10-issue series, which was canceled due to low sales back then, which is kind of interesting because it didn't happen super often with Batman characters. But this is going to be essentially kind of a mirror to the Joker Bronze Age omnibus, but in paperback form for a lot less price. Justice League of America, 1960 to 1963, Star of the Conqueror, releasing March 31st, 2026. This will contain the earliest appearances of the Silver Age Justice League, which is the beginning of the Justice League and their fight against Starro, as well as establishing their team. So it's the beginning point of the Justice League's history. Our next sequential volume, 1966 to 1969, The Bridge Between Earths, November 19th, 2024 release. These are issues that contain a little bit of crossover, a little bit of connection to the JSA in establishing that the Silver Age DC continuity is on Earth 1, whereas the Golden Age was on Earth 2. So it's kind of another point in history for the Justice League. Then our last Justice League volume for now is 1985-1987, The Return, released August 5th, 2025, which contains the last of the Justice League issues leading into Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then also ending before the relaunch of Justice League International. So we kind of have the beginning, middle, and end of this era of Justice League, which is kind of an interesting way to do it. We shall see how the gaps fill out in the future. For Justice Society of America, we have 1940-1942 for America and Democracy, released December 3rd, 2024. This has the earliest appearances of the Justice Society, which mostly were them sitting around a table telling each other what they were doing, and it being more of an anthology book. And this continued with 1942 to 1945, Plunder the Psycho Pirate, released on July 8th, 2025. That's your Golden Age goodness right there. Next, we have Legion of Superheroes 1968 to 1974. Zap Goes the Legion, released December 10th, 2024. This is interesting because it actually is reprinting the back half of the Legion of Superheroes Silver Age Omnibus Volume 3, and then reprinting some stuff that hasn't been done since the archive days. Very interesting volume. It has Jim Shooter, who was a big influential guy at Marvel, but he was writing the Legion as a teenager, and when he came on board, made the book better. And also Dave Cockrum does art here. I think this was kind of picked because of the creative teams involved, though personally I think I would have picked something from the Paul Levitz run of the 70s, a little bit more consistent in story quality. This is a nice volume to have because it's not stuff that's usually reprinted. All right, Metamorpho got a volume with 1965-1972, The Element Man, released June 17, 2025, just in time for his appearance in the Superman movie. This contains a lot of Silver Age Metamorpho solo stories, and it's a pretty concise volume. All right, Peacemaker, 1966 to 1993, Kill for Peace. This was released April 1st, 2025. This will give you a look at what Peacemaker was like prior to James Gunn. This has Charlton and DC Peacemaker stories going all the way through into the 90s, because this character is not one that was prominently used and is a completely different person than the one we see in James Gunn's DCU. Honestly, I think James Gunn made an improvement in a lot of ways, but if you want to see the original stories for Peacemaker, there's now a concise volume for you to check that out. Plastic Man, 1941-1944, The Origin of Plastic Man, released March 4th, 2025. This contains the earliest Plastic Man stories through Police Comics, as well as his own titled series, wacky comedy, superheroics, and some crazy characters. Can't go wrong with the classic Plastic Man. Robin, The Origin of Robin, releasing June 16, 2026, is essentially similar to the Bronze Age Robin Omnibus, containing a bunch of stories for Robin's history over the point in time. Don't exactly have the perfect year range on this yet, but this will be a lot of stories with Dick Grayson Robin, and going off on his own adventures separate from Batman. For the science fiction genre, we have 1953-1954, The Gorilla World. Volume does not contain as much gorillas as promised. July 15, 2025. This contains stories from Action Comics, Strange Adventures, and Mystery in Space. Similar to the horror volume, it's a bunch of sci-fi stories that wouldn't go anywhere else. Sergeant Rock, 1959-1961, The Rock of Easy Company, coming out May 19th, 2026. This will contain issues of Our Army at War, which features Sergeant Rock. There is another type of DC Finest volume to cover things before Sergeant Rock debuted. This is focusing on Sergeant Rock himself. The Spectre, 1967-1975, The Wrath of the Spectre, released September 16, 2025. This contains like 90% of what was in the Spectre Omnibus, but it does contain 2 issues of All-Star Squadron that weren't in that Spectre Omnibus, so it's nice to see we're including everything with these volumes. This is great stuff, great horror stuff from the 70s especially. Highly recommended from my part. Static, 1993-1994, Playing with Fire, released October 7th, 2025. This is the first non-DC book to be published under the DC label, because this is a character owned by Milestone Comics, who is published by DC. Now, Static himself has had a lot of prominence because of the Static Shock cartoon and his other connections and crossovers with the DC Universe. So if you want to see the origins and the original stories of Static without having to buy the entire Milestone Universe and Compendium, this is the place to go. Suicide Squad, the original John Ostrander run, 1986-1988, Trial by Fire, released March 11th, 2025. This contains the first chunk of Suicide Squad, including the entire Legends miniseries, as they were heavily involved with that. This was essentially the first half of the first omnibus, which released not too far apart from this DC Finest. And the next volume, 1988 to 1991, The Nightshade Odyssey, releasing July 21st, 2026, will contain the back half of that first Ostrander omnibus, containing all the extra issues you need, besides just Suicide Squad, including the Deadshot miniseries. Super Friends, 1975-1979, The Fury of the Super Foes, releasing November 4th, 2025. This contains the first 26 issues of the Super Friends comic, tying into the classic Hanna-Barbera series. Superboy, 1954-1955, The Superdog from Krypton, releasing May 13th, 2025. This contains the early stories of Superboy that feature Krypto, because, you know, movie tie-in. I don't mind that when it gets us comic reprints. This is pretty much like early, like late Golden Age, early Silver Age type of stuff, and it's a fun time if you enjoy that era. Supergirl, 1959-1962, The Girl of Steel, released January 14th, 2025. This is going to contain all the stories featuring Supergirl, which is Kara Zor-El at this point, and it has just a bunch of things from a bunch of different stories because it's going to be containing just what Supergirl appeared in. And I love volumes like this because when a character doesn't have an ongoing, it's a lot easier to have a collected volume that's curated, so you're not bouncing all around looking for all the stories of your favorite characters. Supergirl, 1996-1997, Body and Soul, releasing October 14th, 2025. This volume contains the Peter David run from the 90s, featuring Linda Danvers and Matrix bonded as Supergirl, and is the beginning of this run, which hopefully will get eventually the rest of the series collected, because that's never happened before. For Superman, we have 1938 to 1940, The Coming of Superman, released November 5th, 2024. The beginnings on the origins of Superman, that is his first sequential volume in the Golden Age. Then we have 1940-1941, The Invisible Luthor, which is releasing December 2nd, 2025. That picks up where the previous volume left off, continuing the Golden Age adventures. Then we jump ahead a bit to 1950-1951, Superman, The Last Days of Superman, releasing February 17th, 2026. This contains more of the Silver Age, or more of the late Golden Age era of Superman before we get into the Silver Age stuff. The next volume jumps to the Bronze Age, 1970-1971, Kryptonite Nevermore, released June 3rd, 2025. This contains 70s Superman, which is kind of a weird era, like pre-Crisis, you know, like by a significant amount, but kind of like not super notable, and people don't talk about it as much, which was nice to see, because I think a bunch of this had never been recollected before. And then we have 1990-1991, Time and Time Again, releasing May 26, 2026. And this contains the beginning of the Triangle era of Superman, where Superman, Adventure Superman Action Comics basically acted like a weekly book that was being published multiple times. And this contains the first section of that, which is going to equate to, I think, almost half the first Triangle Years omnibus. And that is a great era, highly recommended. Superman Family, 1960-1961, The Giant Turtle Man, released April 15, 2025. This contains issues of Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, as well as stories from Action Comics and Superman featuring those two characters. What a brilliant volume. The fact that Jimmy and Lois got their own, series back in the day, this is the way to do it instead of separate volumes. It's also the thickest DC Finest to date, if I'm not mistaken, and that is a pretty good value for all your crazy Silver Age antics. All right, next up is team-ups, which are team-up books combined together. 1973 and 1976, The Impossible Escape, releasing June 9th, 2026. This is going to be containing issues from Brave and the Bold primarily. Then we have 1978 to 1979, not exactly sure why there's like a 2-year gap there, but whatever. Chase to the End of Time, which is March 18th, 2025 released, and this contains issues of Brave and the Bold, as well as the first 14 issues of DC Comics Presents. Brave and the Bold was a comic where Batman would team up with a different hero each issue, and DC Comics Presents was a series where Superman teamed up with a different hero each issue. And it's fun to get these stories because I think they're not going to be published in the Batman and Superman just because there's so many of them, and I think this is a great way to do it. You might see some of these stories, like maybe the Flash ones will show up in the Flash, but since every issue had Batman or Superman for those two series, I don't think they're going to be publishing them in the main book. And it's nice to have these team-up stories because it has a great anthology feel. You can jump in and read a quick story where two of your favorite heroes are teaming up. Teen Titans, 1983-1984, probably their most famous story of all time, The Judas Contract, released February 4th, 2025. So this is from the Marv Wolfman and George Perez run, which is iconic. It's revolutionary. It is the Teen Titans in my eyes. And this series in particular is needing of new reprints, and I think this is a great way to do it. And yes, it does revolve around the Judas Contract storyline, which is kind of a weird place to start, but considering how famous it is and how many times it's been adapted, it's not a bad place to start either, and I think, honestly, it's pretty great, and I hope we see more of these in the future. Our next genre collection, War, 1957, The Big Five arrive, releasing November 11th, 2025. This will contain stories from Our Army at War, prior to Sergeant Rock's debut, Star-Spangled War stories, GI Combat, Black Hawk, Our Fighting Forces, and All-American Men of War. Because in the 50s and 60s, they had a lot of war comics at DC. It was post-World War II and everything. They had a lot during World War II as well. So it kind of makes sense to throw all of these together. It will take like dozens of volumes to get it all, and I'm not sure we ever will. But if you enjoy those types of stories, this is definitely worth picking up, because if they sell well, they'll keep making them. If they don't, that's maybe the only one we see. But I'll take what I can get. We also have Western, 1970-1972, The Hangman Never Loses, March 10th, 2026, containing weird Western tales, All-Star Western, as well as Tomahawk. Now, these comics are going to be the non-Jonah Hex stuff. They haven't confirmed a Jonah Hex DC Finest, but there's no Jonah Hex within this volume, as far as I know from my research. And I think just like Sergeant Rock got his own line separate from War, I think that Jonah Hex is going to get his own line separate from Western, just like Deadman is separate from Horror, that kind of thing. It makes sense when you know your DC history. And then, of course, we leave the best for last with Wonder Woman, 1941 to 1943, introducing Wonder Woman, releasing December 9th, 2025, will contain the beginning of Golden Age Wonder Woman in Sensation Comics, as well as her own self-titled series. This will continue in 1943 and 1944 into the Cheetah on February 3rd, 2026, which is picking up right where the previous volume left off, which we love to see. We also have 1983 and 1986, The Legend of Wonder Woman, released July 1st, 2025. This is the Wonder Woman that came right before Crisis, so it's right before George Perez redid Wonder Woman after Crisis on Infinite Earths, so it's kind of like the last volume of the pre-Crisis era. Then we have 2007-2009 Origins and Omens, which is a November 12th, 2024 release. This is containing Gail Simone's run on Wonder Woman, as well as additional stories that were published around the same time that weren't written by Gail Simone, so they weren't in the Gail Simone omnibus, like Outsiders, Five of a Kind. This was also followed up with 2009-2010 Dawn Before Darkness, which is a May 12, 2026 release containing the rest of Gail Simone's Wonder Woman run, as well as crossover issues with Secret Six and the Blackest Night Wonder Woman series by Greg Rucka. So you get pretty much a really solid era between those two volumes, and one of my favorites for Wonder Woman. I have the omnibus, and I have the Blackest Night Wonder Woman in the Greg Rucka omnibus, so I'm covered there, but I'd highly recommend both those volumes if you want some good modern Wonder Woman. Also, these just look really nice on a shelf. Oh my gosh. These are the things I dream of with spines. So there has been 66 DC Finest released or announced so far. Now I'm going to read you the whole list in release date order. Just kidding, I'm not doing that. We already just went through everything. These are great, and I hope that this helped maybe parse through, give you some ideas of what eras and what kind of stories are within, without doing like a deep dive in every single one of them, because there are other people on YouTube that do that. This was kind of just like a, let's take in what we've gotten in 1 year, and I gotta say, some of the things I really enjoy, huge variety of eras. It's not just all Golden Age, it's not just all Silver Age, not just all Bronze, it's all over. Which is great. The character variety is fantastic. It is absolutely amazing. It's kind of like even more character variety than Epic Collection has like 10 years in, so I got to give DC credit on that point. And I just really like the way that the books are mapped out, and that $40 price point is real nice. Because sometimes, yeah, you're spending $40 for Blue Beetle, but then you're spending $40 for like Superman Family, and that one's just like super huge. So I love these, and I hope these keep going because I have been enjoying so far. And I was tempted when they announced these to get all of them. I was like, I could buy all of them from the beginning. I wouldn't read them all because there's stuff that I just, I would not have the time. But I picked and chose. I picked and choosed. I got stuff that I've never had before, or upgrades like Catwoman. I had the previous trades, but these have a lot more in them. So, upgrading things I like, upgrading things I never had before, that kind of thing, This is my collection, and actually technically these three Silver Age Superman Family volumes, those are my mom's. She went the Silver Age Superman stuff, but this is it. This is DC Finest 1 year in. I'm happy, and I hope it goes for many years to come. So if you enjoyed this video and you didn't already, hit that like button, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. If you want to continue the conversation, go join our Discord server in the link below. And if you want to get perks like early access to videos, become a channel member, and you get a special shout out as well, like these channel members. Special shout out to all of our channel members, including Captain Tears, Spin-54, Masterman95, Forever1000, Super Shaddix Boom, Mr. Smelly Tomato, Veloquince, Thiago Ribeiro, Jacobu Shiraz, Ghostly, Dr. Carver, Mr. Arrowverse 16, Parzival Joker, Sherez, Philippe Ceruno, Renato, and Gabriel Saez. Also special shout out to Lightning63 for joining at Commander tier. Thank you everybody for the support of this channel, members and viewers alike. If you so wish, I'm on social media on Blue Sky and Letterboxd at Soundout12. You can also find my wonderful graphic designer on social media and Discord at DarkClaw643. You can find Hero Club at hero-club.com for comic reviews and more. And until next time, this is Soundout saying, long live DC Finest.